Well, Madam Speaker, I want to share some good news with the House. The Seattle Mariners will host 9,000 fans. They just got approval from Washington State, a very progressive and woke state south of the border whose ideological inclinations are very similar to this government, and they have signed off on a safe plan, according to that state, to allow 9,000 fans to participate in a major sporting event in Seattle, no less. We got simultaneously the news that our Toronto Blue Jays are not going to be able to do anything similar. In fact, they put out a statement in which they said that though we had hoped for improvements in the public health outlook as we neared the 2021 baseball season, with the ongoing Canada-U.S. border closure, we have made the difficult decision to play the first two homestands of the 2021 regular season at TD Ballpark in Florida. So the Floridian businesses will get all of the benefit of that major sporting event. Now, it is not just sporting events, Madam Speaker, that are reopening around the world. The Australians and New Zealanders are finalizing plans for quarantine-free travel across their borders between their two countries. And in Taiwan, which has pretty much the lowest COVID mortality rate on planet Earth, even though it is right next door to the country from whence COVID originated. I'm quoting here from the Brookings Institute, a progressive U.S. think tank, and I'm quoting, Taiwan has managed the spread of COVID-19 far better than most. It suffered only 7 deaths amongst its 23.5 million people in 2020. Except for a few short weeks of lockdown in March last year, life in Taiwan has been normal. Schools, offices, and restaurants have been open as usual, although with temperature screening, hand sanitizing, and social distancing. Live concerts by Yo-Yo Ma and performances of the Phantom of the Opera have attracted thousands of people into indoor arenas. Again, all of this with 7 deaths, not 7 deaths per 100,000, not 7 deaths per million, 7 total deaths since COVID started in the country right next door to Taiwan. In fact, Canada now has 601 deaths per million. Taiwan, it's 0.42. Singapore, 5.13. Australia, 35.6. In other words, even if you just compare us to Australia among that group, we have a factor of 20 times higher deaths per capita than they do. And we have among the most severe restrictions on our lives. Now, Madam Speaker, it is easy to sort of wave one's hand and say, well, who cares about baseball or artistic conferences or travel between countries? None of those things are core to human existence, so we ought not worry about the fact that they are still largely eliminated and restricted. But the reality is, they are but symbols of the massive human sacrifice that our people are forced to make. Not only do we have a ranking of roughly 45 for vaccinations per capita, we are ranked 11 out of 15 in the misery index. That is the overall combined misery that we have suffered during the COVID pandemic, according to the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. And this is not just numbers and stats, it is human lives. Calls to one suicide prevention line have risen 200% over the last year, reports CBC. That has prompted Conservative MP from British Columbia to put forward a motion for a single suicide hotline. A good idea, but one that we wish we didn't have to pursue. We wish there was no need for suicide hotlines. But the University of Calgary's found that for every 1 percentage point increase in unemployment, you get a 2 percentage point increase in suicides across Canada. That is the human cost. Now, let's go not just to suicides, but drug overdoses, which have also spiked during the pandemic, up 50% in both Alberta and Ontario during the times that Canadians were forced to lock themselves down. These statistics reflect what has happened right across the country. Even the Chief Public Health Officer Theresa Tam wrote, Statistics Canada found lower life satisfaction among unemployed Canadians and noted that this relationship is about more than just money. She is pointing out in that statement what Canadians who are suffering lockdown in their homes or restricted from their jobs have known all along, that this is not just a massive $100 billion economic crisis, though it definitely is that. This is not just about a $400 billion deficit, by far the biggest in Canadian history. This is about people's human and very real suffering that has led to higher mortality rates in countless other areas. I think not just of the drug and opioid overdoses. I think of the suffering seniors, many of whom, through tragic stories we have all heard, have had to die alone, separated from the loved ones they have known all of their lives. I got a message from a senior recently who told me she doesn't know what she has to live for. She has not seen her grandchild in a year. She has not seen some of her children for an equally long time. Many of the activities that she enjoyed doing are now banned, and because she's over 80, she doesn't know how much time she has left. For someone in that age bracket, time is a precious and shrinking commodity, one that this government, through its incompetence in managing the COVID situation, has exacerbated day by day. This is the very real human suffering that has resulted from the government's failure to safely protect our country from this pandemic and allow us to go forward and reopen our economy while protecting human lives. You think, for example, of our friends in Israel, where the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was on the phone at 3 in the morning with the companies that are responsible for delivering the vaccines, and as a result, he was able to deliver more than 100 vaccines for every 100 Israelis already to this day, whereas we're now around 5. Tiny Israel, a small country with endless security and economic challenges, surrounded by hostile states, many of whom are controlled by terrorists and tyrants, is managing to outperform Canada. And then we look at the other countries of the world. Singapore, a tiny island with no resources. Taiwan, right next door to the origin of the disease. And I know what liberals across the way are thinking. Sure, Israel and Taiwan and Singapore are ahead of Canada, but they're such advanced countries. How could we expect to compete with them? You know, there was a time when Canada had an advanced economy, when we were among the best places on earth in which to do business and deliver the necessities of human life. But sadly, those days are slipping away, and I fear that we are accepting slowly, as the frog in the heating water, the loserdom that this government is bringing us. Highest deficit as a share of GDP in the G20. Worst vaccination rates in the G7. Highest unemployment rate in the G7. These have been the results for Canada. And there's almost a sort of a quiet acceptance that Canada can be behind the rest of the world. A country that used to be the best, the United Nations would say we were the best place on planet Earth in which to live. You don't hear people talking like that anymore. Now they talk about Ireland, which has a GDP per capita 70% higher than Canada. A country with a fraction of the resources and land of Canada, and nowhere near the geographic advantage that we enjoy here in Canada. We have got to say enough is enough. We are not going to accept loserdom anymore. We as a country should be the best, not just at procuring vaccines and protecting our population, but at everything else. We have been blessed with more natural advantages than any country on earth, maybe than any country in the history of the world. It is time for us to hold ourselves and our government to a higher standard so that we can live up to the expectations that we as Canadians for so long had, and pass on to our country, pass on to the next generation, a country that is second to none. Thank you.